everyone has something. And the wisest leaders in the world, they're just not scared of their something. Wisdom is not the absence of wounding, but rather the intimacy with it.
Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Hello, Encouragers. On this week's podcast, I have a guest that is going to put two words together that you don't typically see together. But if we reflect enough, we'd be like, oh, yeah, I did learn a lot from that. And so I'm really excited to interview our guest, Tony, today to talk to us a little bit about why he put these two words together and why it does matter in our current life and what we're trying to do. Tony Miltenberger is the founder of Follow to Lead Coaching. He is a veteran, podcast host, executive coach, author, and the associate pastor of disciple making at Centerville Grace Church in Ohio. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Listen, you and I started talking the moment I hopped on, and I feel like we're best friends now.
I feel like the Encouragers, guess what our first story is? By the way, there was barely a hi, and I said, Tony, I was getting rid of mice today. Like that's we just
that's
went,
where we jumped right into what to do with mice, right? And pregnancy in the midst of all of that. Yes. Pregnant mice. So
a maternity word for mice. That was my agenda today. Okay, I'm really interested in, as both you and I both know, that titles don't matter, but you do hold a lot of them. I want to know when you served. You have veteran on here. And what came first, pastor or veteran?
Oh, veteran, okay. For sure. I enlisted in the Army Reserves while I was still in high school. So in 1998, I enlisted. I finished my senior year at high school, graduated in 99, and then 3 days later, I left for basic training. But the problem was I was in love with this girl, and she was like, hey, I'm never leaving Ohio. And I was like, so then the reserves were it. And so I was in the Army Reserves for 14 years. I got all expense paid trip to Kuwait, Iraq, Minnesota, Germany, El Salvador.
Minnesota.
Like it was very exotic. It was very exotic. The Twin Cities, very exotic. Yes. I stayed in Bloomington, Minnesota. I stayed at a residence inn for a year, and I traveled around the Midwest doing marriage retreats for soldiers coming back from deployment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and were you married at the time too?
I was, yep. I got married in 2003, and that deployment was in 2007. As a matter of fact, at that point in time, I had my oldest son, Connor. He was be the first of three. So I have two boys and a princess. And so, and now my son he is now in the Navy. He's at the Naval Academy.
So is this in your family? Is that why you were like, yep?
Ish, right? So my grandfather served a little bit, but it was really, I don't like debt and I wanted to go to college. And so the Army was a really great way to make that happen. And I also was not very mature. I'm still not very mature, but I was really immature then. And so I needed to grow up a little bit so I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life. There were two things in my life that I were really good at in high school. And that was this JROTC program called Civil Air Patrol and youth group. And I actually met my wife in youth group. Our parents still go to the same church together to this day. So I was like, man, I'm pretty good at this Civil Air Patrol stuff. I'm pretty good at this youth group stuff. What happens if I put the two together? What does that look like? And I became a chaplain's assistant in the Army Reserve. So I got to do ministry in the Army and still come home. And it was just a beautiful setup. The Army paid for all of my undergrad and 2 years of my seminary. And I'm forever thankful for them.
So you had kind of the entrepreneur spirit early on, like entrepreneurs say, I'm good at this and I'm good at this. What could I put these together? So it was even born then, which is why all these things, executive coach, author, associate pastor, but now you reside in Ohio, correct?
I've always lived in Ohio, the great state of Ohio, the birthplace of aviation, Dayton, Ohio, home of Orville and Wilbur Wright. Come on.
Nice cow. That's also when we were talking about traveling, you got to come to the Black Hills. So those of you guys who are from South Dakota know the Black Hills. And they got out of the car to pet the fluffy cow. Just kidding. They didn't actually pet it. But while he was telling the story of looking at this really awesome buffalo bull, all I could think was our tourist shirts here that say, don't pet the fluffy cow. So, but they didn't, guys. They got back in the car. Tony was smart.
I was very situationally aware. Told my son to get back in the car. Let's not get eaten by whatever that can do. Yep. I don't know.
You were so smart. But then I'm like, wait, does South Dakota know that's an inside joke? Or does the whole everybody, who knows? Who knows? Okay, you wrote a book, which brings us back to the two words that I would never have put together. But after reading about it, I thought, okay, I understand a little bit, but I want you to go into deeper detail. Your book is called Wisdom in the Wound. What was the first moment in your life, Tony, when you realized your own wounds might actually hold some wisdom?
The interesting part about that story is that it was in the middle of COVID, and my wife and I were on our second walk of the day, because that's what we did during COVID. We walked all the time.
Therapy.
And we're on this walk around the neighborhood, and I looked at my wife and I said, babe, I've been here before. And she was like, yeah, we were here this morning. And I was like, no, not like physically here, but emotionally, I've been here before. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, when I was deployed, what I realized is that prolonged stress, the kind of stress that happens in seasons of our lives, the kind of stress that you don't know what's going to happen next, right? Infant parenting is like this. Toddler parenting can be like this. As I'm learning, teenage parenting can be like this. Prolonged stress turns cracks in our lives into canyons. And so a crack is anything that you can ignore, you can step over, that you don't want to talk about at cocktail parties. It's those kind of things that we just like, I'm just going to hold that in. I'm going to hold it a little close to the vest. But a canyon, it can't be avoided. Like, canyons are huge and they're gaping, and you can get lost in a canyon, and you could even die in a canyon. And the thing about prolonged stress is it essentially takes that crack. Maybe it's an identity issue. Maybe it's a relationship issue, and it just blows it up. And we had experienced that during that deployment when I was in Kuwait and Iraq from 2004 to 2005. And I began to realize that the gift of looking in canyons is that you can get so comfortable with them that they're not scary anymore.
And that's a gift?
All of us have canyons. Like, I've never met someone, I get to speak to lots of rooms, and I always ask people, who here in the room is broken? Everyone raises their hand. No one ever disassociates themselves with brokenness. And yet, we don't often talk about the handles that go on that. So if you're broken, how did that happen? What's the opportunity? What's the consequence? Theologically, if nerd out theologically for just a second, we would call it the epistemic consequence of sin. In other words, sin enters the world, and there's always a consequence for sin. Sin is anytime we separate ourselves from God. And in that separation, that's where brokenness lives. And so if we are to believe that there is brokenness in the world, and the world is inherently broken, then on this side of heaven, there's always a consequence for that brokenness. And what I began to realize as I did more pastoral counseling, did more executive coaching, did more even counseling in the Army, everyone has something. And the wisest leaders in the world, they're just not scared of their something. Wisdom is not the absence of wounding, but rather the intimacy with it.
Oh my gosh, that right there. Yeah, not the absence, but the intimacy of the wound. But it makes us so uncomfortable. I would rather get a running start and jump right over that crack and not have to go into the cannon. Okay. You share stories from your military service, your ministry, and your family life. Which stories, like you just talked about here, really gripped you that you were like, okay, here is the wound that you hadn't yet uncovered? Like, I'm assuming with that many different scenarios of that many different people, there are wounds that you were like, whew, I did not see that one coming, or I've never experienced or had someone tell me about that wound.
So the answer to that is yes and.
Okay.
Right. Yes, there are a lot of details to people's stories that are surprising and can be heartbreaking. Right. There was a soldier who came back from R&R. When you're deployed, you get 2 weeks of R&R. You get to come home for 2 weeks, and then you got to go back and finish your deployment. The deployments in that season of life in the Army were about a year long. And so I worked at the base where people would kind of come through. It was like a revolving door. It's called the APOD, Aerial Port of Debarkation, Embarkation. Anyway, the revolving door came with a bunch of stories. And one of the stories was that this young soldier, went home to his wife, who was newly married, only to find that their house was boarded up and she had divorced him without him even knowing it.
What?
Yeah, heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, right? Now, here's the thing, is that the details are heartbreaking. That's what we would call the physical truth. But if you want to do really good work, right? If you're an encourager and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I want to go to the next level, then the key is to not search for the physical truth, search for the emotional truth. The emotional truth is this soldier came home. He felt abandoned. He felt lost, and he wasn't sure what to do. And he still isn't sure what to do. And now we, as the chaplain corps in this particular case, we have the unique opportunity to help him trace that back, right? When's the first time that you felt this kind of abandonment? How often does it show up in your life? And then what I began to quickly realize as I did more and more of this work is that the enemy, right? Satan, sin, devil, whatever you want to call him or it, the enemy is not a creator. And so there are patterns, right? And these patterns begin to identify kind of these woundings. And to be clear, I'm not talking about like what some psychologists would call big T trauma. I'm talking about little T trauma. This happens between the ages of 4 and 12 for most of us. It's nobody's fault. It's not malicious in intent. It's just brokenness that comes in the world. So, when we can begin to see our own brokenness, we can begin to see patterns. We can begin to see other people's brokenness. And we begin to realize nobody did that to them. Nobody did that to me. But man, did it change the way that I see the world. So an example from my own life, right? Let's put some handles on it. When I was 4 years old, my parents had unplanned twins. Praise the Lord, right?
I'm a twin.
Yeah. And so I love my brother and sister, wouldn't trade them for the world. Absolutely. They're a gift to humanity. And also from that moment on, I felt like I didn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
Because my parents were overwhelmed. I had an older sister, the younger twins, and I was right there in the middle. And so my parents would end up getting divorced when I was 8, get remarried when I was 10. And there's this entire narrative of my life that says, you don't really matter.
So you felt like you were in the fringes, just like
all the time.
Wow.
Now, here's what's crazy, right? I end up picking careers that put me in front of microphones and people so that I can try to feel like I matter.
Whoa. Okay, I feel like I should tell you do matter, and you do have a very powerful message. I feel like I should check on your brother Josh, who was the one born before Sarah and I. And then like, wow. So as you were doing this, you were unpacking like, wait, this is because of the original wound, if you will. That wasn't your parents' fault or anything like that too. We tend to try to assign blame to it, but it's not there. It's just what happened. It's just what occurred.
Yeah. And so the key is that if you can become really intimate with your wound without judgment or shame, then what you get is you get the gift of what is on the other side, which is, my feeling that I wasn't seen, but what's my unique gifting in the world? I see people.
So the initial wound usually happens between the age of 4 and 12, you said. That's been what you've discovered.
And I have never met anyone that doesn't have one.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So if this is the epistemic, right, if it's the center of the consequence of brokenness in the world, then everyone has one.
True.
Right. And so then that becomes a lens at which we look through life. And then through Christ, our wounding is redeemed. Right. 2 Corinthians 5:16-21, Paul talks about the ministry of reconciliation so that we can be Christ's ambassadors. Right. And so our redemption of that brokenness is your gifting.
Which wouldn't come if you didn't have the original wound.
Yeah.
Wow. Guys, I'm going to have to unpack this. I'm going to have to pause when I'm listening to this after we edit it too and be like, well, what is mine? Not that I'm confessing it to you guys now, but if I figure it out, I will share after I spoke with Tony.
Well, so can I give you a tool to help with that?
Yes.
So here's one of the things that I talk about in the book that I think is the most important tool that God gave me in this process. It's called the emotional intensity scale. So on a scale from 1 to 10, you have emotions. 1 is like, I'm barely breathing. And 10 is like, I've got big feelings, right? On a scale from 1 to 10, anytime your emotional intensity spikes above a 6 or above, it's always more about you than it is the other person. And more often than not, what is happening in that moment is someone is bumping up against your wound.
I do have big emotions around certain subjects, so I'm going to have to unpack that. That did help. That's a very helpful tool. And will it also clue us into those around us where their wounds are close?
100%.
If they're having
100%, because you can begin to see it. So here's an example. My son he's 19 now. When I started writing this, he was 17. And so I was really curious what his wound was. I had some guesses, but one of the things I talk about in the book is that it's not really ideal for us to name other people's wounds.
Right.
And so we want to lead with grace. Now, I define grace as God's unmerited favor, but grace in application is empathy plus curiosity.
Oh, that's a really practical way of looking at grace. Empathy plus curiosity.
If I can give my son grace, then I can sit with him in his mud puddle and I can ask questions to learn how he's really feeling. And so, of course, he's 17 at the time. So the best way to do that is when he's in the car strapped in and he's got nowhere else to go. If you have teenagers, you know that that's the best time to talk to them.
And they have food.
And so I said, and food, right? I said, hey, son, can I, I'm working on this book. I would love to talk to you about your wound. And he said, please no, Dad.
Right. No, thank you.
And I said, please, it would really help me. He goes, okay. I said, what do you think that your wound is? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, well, let me ask you like this. What do I do that makes you the most angry? He said, when I feel like you need me to do stuff, like when you ask me about my college applications, or I just feel like there's so much pressure. Okay, pressure is the word that I keyed in on. And so then you can begin to pull the string and trace it all the way back to the beginning, like we talked about earlier. I said, well, when do you feel like I first put that pressure on you? And he said, well, if I'm really honest, it's when we moved to Centerville and you became the lead pastor. And I said, okay, that's really great. How did I pressure you? And he said, Dad, I just remember you telling me that it was really important for your job for me to behave.
Wow. Ugh.
And so his wound is that he feels like performance equals love.
Yeah.
Now, my wife and I did nothing like that on purpose.
Right. No.
It wasn't malicious. We love that kid to the moon and back. And yet he's wounded.
Oh my God.
But also his gift is that he has this really unique ability to hold responsibility in a way that most 19-year-olds don't. He is an elite leader.
Okay.
And so he holds responsibility because that's the redemption of his brokenness, which happened because I'm broken and my wife is broken.
This episode of The Encourager is brought to you by Rebecca Scott Designs, where we make custom purses and accessories designed by you for the life you actually live. From fabrics and linings to leathers and 20 plus styles, every detail is your choice. Each piece is handmade right here in South Dakota, where we believe beauty and function should go hand in hand. Visit designyourownbag.com to create your own custom bag and use code ENCOURAGER for $10 off your purchase. Well, first of all, thank you for being so vulnerable, because no parent wants to tell that story, right? So I don't remember which child it is, and this is not because I'm protecting them, but I probably would if I did remember. And then after I ask this question, Tony, remind me, I want you to give us one more example, because I love this side by side. My child said to me one time, I'm thinking it was Rosalind, I think it was you. We were busy doing something and it wasn't going necessarily as planned or as quick as planned, but I was totally casual about it. Like I was like, it's fine, whatever. And my daughter said, as she was working on it, not looking up at me, she goes, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm wasting your time. And I was like, what? I said, honey, you're not wasting my time. She goes, well, I know you like to keep things rolling. And I was like, oh my gosh, the shame I felt like, stop, we're not working on this project anymore. And I don't even remember what we did, you guys. I have no nice, neat bow for the story other than just my self-reflection of like, I screwed up this kid. She thinks that if we're not moving at the right pace, then somehow they're wasting my time.
Well, and so what's so beautiful about that is that if we can come to a place as parents where we just accept the fact that all of our kids are wounded because the world is broken,
okay,
then all of a sudden we can relieve some of that judgment and shame, right? Judgment and shame do not produce the fruit of the Spirit.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
Right? And so we have a tendency to hold on to that because it feels more powerful than the truth does. And the truth is kind of more of a quagmire, right? Like you probably are a type A driven entrepreneur. Yes. And it is incredible, right? And why you do that is probably directly connected to your wounding.
Yep.
That's right. Right. Sure. And you can begin to trace all of that back, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I'm sure that your kids, through no fault of your own, felt like at times your other projects mattered more than they did. And again, that's okay. I mean, like, you didn't do it on purpose. That's not really your heart. But on this side of heaven, that's what brokenness means.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Give us another example of a wounding and how it was their blessing and their calling, because I think the more examples we can give, the
Sure.
listeners can start picking up on, you so easily said, like, I picked up on the word pressure and then I pulled that thread. Give us some insight to what that looks like when we're asking our loved ones and ourselves.
Yeah. So one of the wounds that I see a lot is people who felt like they grew up in homes where the parents weren't around very much.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you felt like maybe when you look back on your childhood, you're like, oh, my parents love me, but they worked all the time. And that's okay. Right. Nobody did that on purpose. No one's out to get you. There's no judgment or shame in that. But because of that, you felt like you were on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And like, man, part of me is I just had to pull myself up on my bootstraps and I was just doing the thing and I was just, right. And you can begin to, again, you pull that thread. And one of the questions that I love for people to wrestle with is, when is the first time in my life I felt that feeling? Trace it all the way back. And then here's what I typically see from someone who has a wound similar to that. The gifting is they're incredibly loyal and they're always there for people that matter to them.
Okay. True. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the ways that you can find your wound is by asking people in your life who love you enough to be full of grace and truth, and ask them the hard question. Hey, Rebecca, what's it like to be on the other side of me?
Yes. Craig Rochelle asked that question frequently, and Bob Goff had that question as well. And you're like, I don't know if I want the answer.
I don't want to know.
Never mind.
Right?
Yes. Okay. What's it like to be on the other side of me?
And so then you can begin to look at your greatest gift. If I were to ask the people in your world, Rebecca, what would they say your greatest gift is?
Probably, anecdotally, an encourager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so it probably felt like somewhere along in your life that you weren't always encouraged to chase your dreams.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. Let's have therapy for Becca right now. I was told so often, and it wasn't mean-spirited. And I knew that. I knew it wasn't mean-spirited, but I said very early on as I was sketching things on the bus rides and selling stuff on the playground, I'm like, I want to be a designer. They're like, that's awesome. That's amazing. But you can't do that in the Midwest. You got to move to the coast. And I'm a ranch kid. I'm like, I'm not leaving this. This is amazing. Like I knew my family and our land and everything and what we loved and harvest the whole bit. So I intuitively thought like, well, I guess I can't be a designer then because I don't want to move where I currently am. By the way, I did it anyways, everyone, but I felt discouraged in that.
Right.
And so now, oh my gosh, my whole podcast is to make sure that you guys know you are uniquely gifted in things God gave you and that all of your roles are blessings and that you can, in fact, even 1% the dream. I could go on and on, 330 podcasts worth of why I'm trying to make sure people know you can do the thing. Wow.
And I bet the people in your life are like, Rebecca is the most encouraging person I've ever met.
They do say that a lot.
Right.
I'm going to have to Venmo Tony a therapy fee here, guys.
Well, so here's the thing, right? Here's the thing is that now you can look back on those childhood moments.
Yes.
Right. And you can say, God, thank you so much that I had that moment on the bus or on that moment with that teacher on that, because now we can see Christ's redemption in it, right? Is that we get to see that the goodness of that moment in a completely different light. And so now you can start to think about moments in your life that really seem to spike your emotions, right? Like when you get that emotional intensity spike, like, oh, I get it when someone is discounting my work. Or saying that it doesn't matter.
Or saying that they have to put off the job until the child is X and X age. I'm like, no.
Right. And so anytime someone's get discouraged, it probably bumps up against your wound. This is where it gets really practical, because imagine a world where the leaders around us don't let their feelings drive the car. Right. And so I want the feelings to be there. I want you to be incredibly emotional. I want you to have an emotional life because God gave us emotions and they are good, but don't let the emotions drive.
Right. Yeah.
And so the wisest leaders that I know, and when I look at scripture, I see Jesus do this for sure, is that instead of having emotional reaction, we have intentional responses.
Yes. I like that.
And so feelings at their core are just meant to be felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They're decision points. They're not decision makers.
Okay, well, help me break this down, because I've seen this on my feed a lot lately, where it's like we have to make sure to validate our own feelings and our children's feelings. But I push back on that a little bit personally. So push back on me if you're like, no, that is actually true. Because I'm like, not all feelings are valid. Like, you might be having an overreaction, and it's not okay to rage at your husband or your wife or your children. You got to like have the feeling, but check it. What would you say to that? Like, how do you feel the feelings without getting crazy?
So the only way to do that is to give yourself space. So this is kind of one of the practices that I really subscribe to, is that if you're emotionally above a 6, don't talk to anyone and don't make any decisions.
Okay.
Right? The only thing that you can really do when you're having a really intense emotional moment is put yourself in timeout. Just give yourself space. I told you I was a lead pastor. There was one particular person in my church who was especially challenging, and he oftentimes questioned my integrity because I was leading change, and it was hard. And I wasn't always graceful about it, nor was I always very kind. I was bullish at times. And I'm still bullish at times. It's hard because I'm driven.
Yeah.
And so I would go into this meeting with this particular gentleman, and he would question my integrity, and I would want to chokeslam him. Now, I never did, right? But I had big emotions because he's bumping up against my wound. Do you know what I'm giving up for this church? And this is what's happening inside of my head, right? Mm-hmm. I have this inner monologue going, why does this church hate me so much? Why does this da-da-da, 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 da-da-da? And fortunately, along the way, I have found a really good counselor. And I've had the same counselor for 10 years. And he said, Tony, the next time you see that guy on your calendar, schedule 30 minutes afterwards just to sit underneath your desk and breathe. Because what happens oftentimes when we let our emotions dictate our actions, our emotions in the moment will take us away from the values and the people that we want to be in accordance with what God's called us to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I've never met anyone that says, man, today is the day that I want to ruin my marriage.
Oh gosh. Right. No.
Today's the day that I want to alienate my kids.
Shame.
Right. But instead, what happens is we stop doing the things that keep us healthy. And so one of the things I say on my podcast all the time is that if you aren't dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Man, you are so stinking tweetable. Okay. Say that one again.
If you aren't dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Oh my gosh. And distractions, 1,000%.
Well, you just did a podcast episode about this, about setting up your week up for success, right? And it's about creating that plan and doing all those kind of things. Like, the reason you do that is not so that you can maximize your productivity. The reason you do that is so you don't accidentally blow up your life.
Yes, 100%. Yes. And I'm like, you guys, you don't have to follow it exactly how I just said it, but please do that. Please do that, because it's being disciplined. It's following the path. Which, this could go on a whole nother thing, Tony. I get frustrated with the current books that are being written for children, and even like just the little YouTube shorts that I see my children watch all the time. It's like, your feelings matter, and validate each other's feelings and feel them all out. And I'm like, yeah, but like we just talked about, it within reason. Like, so I will be telling my children too, that's totally okay. That's a big emotion, but giving them a time out, like go for a walk. I have one daughter that definitely goes to shoot baskets. I have another one that just sits and draws on her little whiteboard if she's over exploding. The other one is we'll just say unpredictable. I'm not sure what she does to cope, because she just takes off. But it is different for each one of them how they are going to deal with it. And I'm not sure if it's right, you guys. That's not what I'm saying either. But it does give them a little bit of space. I didn't realize at the time that that's what it's doing. Like, I can understand you're really frustrated with that coach, but it doesn't do any good to come in here and punish me and your sisters. So go outside and get it out.
Motion changes emotion.
Oh gosh, motion shapes. This whole podcast, guys, watch our Instagram for all of Tony's sayings, and then listen to his bajillion podcasts as well. And we'll be like, well, Tony says, because they're so good. They're so practical.
Oh, thank you.
Man. Okay. I totally went off script, encouragers, because I loved the flow of the conversation. Obviously, we have to get the book, Wisdom in the Wound. Where do we go to get that, Tony?
You can go to wisdominthewoundbook.com, or you can obviously pick it up on Amazon or anywhere that you get books. It's in all the places and all the things. And
your podcast.
Yeah, of course. Yes. My podcast, Follow to Lead. I actually am doing a little mini series on the book right now, and that'll be wrapping up here shortly. But you can look back through, like, episode 419 is the start of that episode. 418, 419, 420, and 421 are the 4-part mini series on the book.
And he has some of my favorite, like, fangirl celebrities on his podcast that I'm like, oh my gosh, he got Carrie Newhoff on there, and like big names. Also, did you struggle with when you titled your book Wisdom in the Wound, that it's actually like so many words that you can discover from your wound? Now that we've talked, I'm like, oh my gosh, you could have wisdom in the wound, you could have grace in the wound, you could have perspective in the wound. Like there's so many things that happen when you take a look at the wound.
True story about this title. The publisher and I got into a really big fight about this title.
They hold their ground, don't they?
Well, I wanted to call it something else. They wanted to call it something else. And then they bumped up against my wound in the process of it. They were like, hey, we're changing the title. I was like, no, we're not changing the title. And so then God was just so sweet, as he often is. I repented and the publisher repented. And we came back together and we said, okay, listen, this is what we're going for. And we landed on this. And so while, yes, it could absolutely be any one of those things, this is exactly where God wanted to be. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we often think of the word wound and immediately have a reaction to it. So the fact that you paired it with wisdom does make me relax. Like it makes me curious, at least. Why would there be wisdom in my wound? So it makes me relax and curious. Yeah. Oh, okay. I was finished with this last question. How can you encourage our encouragers?
Let me just say this to the incredible encouragers out there. You are broken, and praise God for that. It's so good. Your wisdom comes from your wound, and you have it, and your people have it, and it's okay. That doesn't get to be the source of your identity. Instead, you are broken, and you are redeemed, and it is so good that you are. And so just continue to live into that goodness. And I know you'll do amazing things for the kingdom.
Also, thank you for so much grace as we talk about as parents, that doesn't have to define you or you have to identify with that. It's because we're broken too. And so I just appreciate that you laid that out too. Like we're messed up. We're in a broken world, but it doesn't have to define us moving forward or keep us stuck in it. Oh, so good. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because he's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Ready to build systems that actually fit your life and budget? The Encourager Academy is now available one module at a time, each just $39 and only 25 to 35 minutes per video. Choose the area you most need help in, your me, food, home, work, or family system, or dive into the mindset, priorities, and super skills that make all the difference. Each lesson is simple, actionable, and designed to help you create sustainable rhythms that bring peace, not pressure. Visit EncouragerAcademy.com to start your next small step towards harmony and joy. If you've ever wished someone could just sit with you, look at your real life, and help you make progress where it matters most, that's what my one-on-one coaching is all about. For over 10 years, I've coached women to harmonize both home and work life, not by forcing them into a program, but by designing systems that actually fit their personality, their season, and their strengths. No cookie cutters, no overwhelm, just sustainable rhythms that help you finally see traction in the areas that matter most to you. Learn more or book your free discovery call at EncouragerAcademy.com. Let's make progress together.